Okay. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November 10th Historic Board meeting. We have an agenda tonight of just a informational listening session for the Lowell Community Charter School, and then our usual order of business. So before we get started into that, the minutes, Steve, from our last meeting, right? Were those distributed to everyone? Okay, were there any questions on the minutes from the last meeting?
No.
Could we get a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Okay, thank you, Gray, and second. Second from Aurora, okay, thank you. And we'll move on from there, okay, so,
All in favor?
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move into the other business, and so on the docket tonight, we have the Lowell Community Charter School here to do a presentation of their upcoming project, and I thank you for this wonderful books. As you approach the podium, just please state your name, and then we can move from there. The speaker, the microphone is just for the recording of this session, it's not for this room, so,
Okay.
okay.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for having us here tonight. My name is Nick Leonardos. I'm the Executive Director for Lowell Community Charter Public School. And we're excited to share with you the report for tonight. I thought we'd spend just a quick few minutes giving you a little bit of background on the school. So the school was founded after several meetings that occurred in 1999 that many area families, many of them immigrants, came together looking to start a new school to meet the needs of the very diverse cultural community that Lowell is, and the school reflects that to this day. I'm not going to read the first 2 pages to you, but you'll see that the school was founded with the motto, learning together to live together, which was a key initial sort of impetus to start the school. And at the time, it was to bring together the Hispanic and the Cambodian communities closer together. And the school really succeeded in that process, in bringing those 2 groups together to the benefit of the community. Since then, the school has had many more families from other parts of Central and South America, especially Brazil, a large Brazilian population, and also Central Africa. And so now, today, the school that I'm privileged to represent reflects the diversity of Lowell. We're about 96% of families and children of color. And as you see from some of the statistics there, we are very much a public school serving all students. And so you can see we have 85% of our students are classified as high needs, which is a combination of low income, second language learning, and special education students. And so comparatively, we serve a very diverse group of students and families. We also have an International Harvest event later this week, which we're very excited about. And so looking at our school from really all angles, we are here to serve the community of Lowell. We are a public school of 815 students. And we are really excited at the prospects that this building project brings to our school, and hopefully a new gymnasium. When I got to the school 9 years ago, there were actually bricks falling into the recess yard. So people would find bricks overnight that had fallen into the yard. And so one of the first things I had to do was hire someone to build a set of fences inside the playground to keep the kids away from the edges of the playground, to keep bricks from falling on top of them. And since then, we've been able to continue to serve the families of Lowell and do so in ways that are really financially sustainable for a public school. And our COO, Robert, will give you a little bit, Robert Gignac will give you a little overview of how we're funded. But I think it's important for you to realize, we're working as part of the community to serve the students and families of Lowell. It's what we do every day. And I think we do a wonderful job of that. And so we're excited again to be here tonight. And Robert will give you a quick overview of how we're funded.
Thanks, Nick. Robert Gignac, Chief Operating Officer, Lowell Community Charter Public School, also Lowell resident. And so, as Nick mentioned, we have been in this building for 25 plus years, and we're honored to be in a historic building in downtown Lowell. I included in your packet a summary of how we're funded, just for reference. I'm not going to go through that in detail, but the key thing to note here is that we do not have access to the municipality or the Mass School Building Authority to support our school building needs. We're here this evening for two topics, one being a more exciting topic than the other. About 10 years ago, the school purchased the space that we occupy in Mill 5 and Mill 6, as well as vacant parcels across Middlesex Street. And the vision at that time was to develop a gymnasium across the street. And so for the good part of 5 years, we've been planning to do so. And so we secured a grant to fund a feasibility study. We hired a project team with a project manager, architect, and construction manager. And we're ready to come before you at this point last year to talk about that building. And then in the fall of '24, we were approached by the former owner of Mill Number 5 about a real estate transaction, which included a gift and a purchase for the commercial space that we occupy, or that they occupied, as well as the land that abuts the property. And so this provided us a unique opportunity to shift gears and move the gym that we planned for across the street directly behind the building, which eliminated the need for a costly overhead bridge across Middlesex Street, and cleared up some serious issues with retaining wall across the street, and some additional costs that were associated with building across Middlesex Street. And so tonight you'll hear from our architects, HMFH, which will give you a brief high-level overview of our plans for this new building. And then in addition to that, we are responding to our last meeting that we had with you folks regarding the smokestack. And so upon taking ownership of Mill Number 5, we also took ownership of a smokestack. And as I mentioned last time, we immediately were concerned with the condition of the smokestack and hired a structural engineer to do a structural assessment, which we've shared with you previously. It's also included in your packet. At that meeting, we heard the board loud and clear. We looked for a second opinion. We hired another structural firm, which you'll hear from this evening. We also hired a firm to perform a historic assessment, which you'll hear from this evening. That will be the later part of tonight's agenda. But we appreciate your time, and I will note that there were some additional slides that were added that will be replacing some slides, but our structural engineer will point you to the corrections this evening. It's some updated data on a few slides. So at this time, I'll turn it over to our principal architect, Pip Lewis from HMFH, to talk about our new building.
Hi, and thank you for having us here. I'm Pip Lewis. I'm principal of HMFH Architects. We're a Cambridge firm that specializes in design of places for education. And we're happy to be here in Lowell, working with the Lowell Community Charter Public School. They've been a wonderful client to work for, and I will just give you a brief overview of the project that we're working on, which is to place an athletic and community center in the area behind or south of Mill Number 5 that the school has recently been able to take possession of. Now, the first image that you have there is of the sort of just the existing conditions of the area around Mill 5 where we're proposing to build. You will see the Mill 5 adjacent to Mill 6. There is a, oh, I was going to say that somebody's cell phone is here, but I know what it is. Yes, yes, I figured that out. And so you see the historic mill. You can see the turbine building, a portion of which was built, I guess, original to the building, and then it has a wing about where it says building that was added at some point later. I think the people from Epsilon will give a more detailed overview of the history of the building. You can see also there's a lower play area, that's the recess area that the school currently uses. It was occupied originally by the boiler room for the mill, and was clearly demolished at some point. Then there's an upper area, which is right on Middlesex Street, where you can see the dark paving, which is new paving. It's currently a parking area. And that was the site of a building that was built in the 70s and torn down in very recent years. And on the next page, you will see just a view from Middlesex Street of the existing space that we have. You can see the smokestack in the foreground. And you also have an image of that lower play area that I referred to. Let's just flip over to, let's go on to the next page where we're showing the new construction. If you can see that, it's in, you have a new gymnasium in sort of a light purple color. And you can see that we're planning on building this athletic and community center in a space that takes over what's existing loading dock and parking areas for the mill, plus it replaces the turbine building. And you can see in this drawing here the location of the smokestack relative to the athletic and community center. The parking area that new parking area where the 1970s building was taken down, we are proposing to become an upper play area, something for basketball and in general for the older kids to play in. And then we want to revamp the lower play area for the younger children. The school goes pre-K through the 8th grade, so they have quite an array of ages to accommodate. There's also a very small courtyard that's labeled courtyard there between the athletic building and Mill 5, which we hope will eventually be a small place where preschool kids and maybe kindergarten kids can gather for stories and a little bit of play and things like that. If you turn to the next page, you will see the exterior axonometric to give you a three-dimensional view of what we're talking about. The gymnasium that we're building, we're proposing to do as a pre-engineered metal building. So it will go up on site. Once we put the foundations in, we'll go up on site fairly quickly. And this is a way of the school achieving this with the lowest possible costs that they can manage with this. You will see a lower area of the building which supports toilet rooms and things like that for the gym, storage areas, a new electric room, some computer space and things like that. And then the higher area of the building is the gymnasium. This will be a full-size gymnasium with bleacher seating for about 400 students, so that for the first time, they will have a real competition basketball court. So their very successful basketball team will have a home place to play, which they're looking forward to greatly. The bleachers also retract, and the gym can be divided in two with a screen so that you can have 2 gym classes going on at a time during the school day. This also will provide, the school, of course, is accessed at the moment off of Jackson Street. This will provide an access for the school off of Middlesex Street. So that also is a great convenience to the school. It would allow sort of a separation perhaps between the drop-off of parents and the buses, which at the moment all occurs on Jackson Street. Then if you go to the next page, which says exterior finish diagram, this is to give you sort of a draft impression of what the exterior of the building might look like. Because it's a metal panel building, it really has to be done in metal panels. We're proposing to do the lower portion of the building, which is sort of where the entrance is, as a color that sort of recalls the color of the school logo. It's sort of a maroon or purple color, dark red color, which is why that is accented like that, and that sort of draws your attention to the entrance of the building. And then we're planning on the big mass of the gymnasium to be in metal panels of 2 different sort of alternating colors. We're trying to choose colors from the sort of the standard catalog of the manufacturing company's colors in order to stay away from premiums for special colors and things like that. We're also, as you will see there, that says, the large sign that says LCCPS, because the school has now gotten possession of all 5 floors of the mill number 5, they really don't have an elevator that is convenient to all 5 floors. There are some elevators that are there, but they're not convenient. They can be used for cargo and things like that. So we're proposing to build a 5-story elevator tower adjacent to the building as a part of this construction. And you will see we're proposing that be clad in brick as sort of our initial take on it. It kind of recalls the 3 stair towers in the front of the building that are attached to the building. And we have positioned all the mechanical units and things like that on the lower portion with a screen wall so that they're not visible from the street. And then if you go to the very next page, it's just a view of the same thing from a different angle. So you're a little bit further down Middlesex Street and hovering in the air. It just shows you that area from a different perspective. You can see the upper play area, which has netting around it, and so the basketballs don't go wandering out into the street. And it has a ramp we're proposing between the upper play area and the lower play area to connect them outside. And that is just a very general overview of where the project stands now. And I think Epsilon will be able to talk about the building and the historic study they've been working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Pip. My name is Doug Kelleher. I'm a principal at Epsilon Associates, and we've been engaged by the charter school to look into the history of the smokestack, get a better understanding of its sort of role in the development of the Appleton Mill, and also to look at the sort of context of the smokestack in comparison to some others across the city. We also understand from the previous meeting that the school is before the board was that you encouraged us to look into different funding sources that could possibly be of assistance in making the necessary repairs. So with that, I'll tell you things that you already know. So the smokestack and the site is obviously located as part of the Appleton Manufacturing Complex, and is included within the Locks and Canal National Register District and National Historic Landmark District, as well as the Historical Park and the Lowell, downtown Lowell Local Historic District. Sort of the brief summary here of the evolution of the complex. The Appleton Mill, as you may be aware, was in operation for just over 100 years, from 1828 to 1929. The earlier expansion of the mill included Mill Number 5, which, as noted, is where the school currently occupies. In addition, Mill Number 5, the early 1873 construction included the turbine house, the boiler house, the smokestack, and the coal shed. The map you see here is an 1878 map, Sanborn map, that sort of shows that early 1873 development. Throughout the 19th century and into the early 20th century, the mill continued to expand with several additional buildings added, including the Appleton Company stores. In the late 19th century and early 20th century, the boiler house additions of 1900 and 1910, smokestack number 2, the second smokestack, which is no longer in existence, from 1910, and then the additions to the turbine house and the extension of 1918 of mill number 5. Over the years, the complex has sort of seen some loss of integrity, largely due to the removal of some of the buildings and later additions, including the boiler house and its additions, the company stores, smokestack number 2, as I mentioned, and the turbine house addition. As a result, the smokestack today is in a bit of an isolated location within the original complex. Next, you'll see some images from 1941 that show the smokestack under question, along with the smokestack number 2. Smokestack number 2 was removed following it being struck by lightning in the early 2000s, and the smokestack that we're discussing tonight has also seen some alterations. Most notably, the removal of the corbelling at the top of the smokestack. So on the bottom photos here, you see the smokestack as it is today. On the left, the smokestack from 1941, and then on the right here, the two smokestacks, the 1870 smokestack, and then the later smokestack number 2, which, as noted, has since been removed. As part of our work, we looked at other smokestacks across Lowell. To give some context to them, we've identified at least 8 other smokestacks, including the Boot Mills smokestack, which you see in the photograph here on the right. Obviously, much more intact, with this corbelling still intact at the top, and obviously much more tied to the larger Boot Mills as far as its integrity. We've identified 2 additional smokestacks at the Lawrence Manufacturing Company, one at the Suffolk Manufacturing Company, now the Wannalysit Mills, 2 at the Lowell Manufacturing Company, 1899 and 1910, the Massachusetts Mills, the Sterling Woolen Mills. The smokestack today at the Appleton Mills is suffered, as noted, a significant loss of integrity within its context of the other buildings, which have since been removed, in addition to the removal of the corbelling at the top. We also wanted to give some detail into the estimated costs for repairs of the smokestack today. The charter school obtained this estimate for making the necessary repairs, just shy of $500,000 at roughly $455,000. But important to note that $455,000 was just basically to address, the smokestack as it exists today, and doesn't relate to the ongoing maintenance that would be required. Again, as heard from the earlier meeting with the board, the school was encouraged to look at potential funding sources to help with the repairs. As noted, the estimate does not include the anticipated ongoing maintenance costs of roughly $250,000. We've identified the CPA as a possible funding source, although, given the size of the repairs, the likelihood of being able to get the full amount awarded in CPA funds would likely be challenging, and also, would not address the sort of ongoing maintenance. The Massachusetts Historical Commission's MPPF program, or the Massachusetts Preservation Projects Fund, is another funding source, but with a cap on their current funding at $50,000 under the matching program, it would not nearly address the amount of repairs that are required. And then the Preservation Massachusetts grant program, which is administered as part of the 1772 Foundation, also another funding source, but has a very limited amount available at $10,000 under that matching program. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike Hughes from SGH, and he can give you some information on some of the things that he's found.
Thanks, Doug. Good evening. My name is Mike Hughes. I am an associate principal with Simpson, Gumpertson, Hager. We are a national structural engineering firm that is headquartered out of Waltham. I'm going to give you an overview of the hands-on assessment that we did of the smokestack, as well as the seismic analysis that we did of the smokestack. You're going to want to follow along with this, so I'll try to make sure I tell you to flip. So if you look at the next page, a quick outline of what I'm going to talk about here. I'll give you a background on the assessment that we did and the smokestack's current condition. I'll talk about what the objective of our study was, what the results of our study were, and what the probabilistic seismic exceedance was, and then I'll summarize it all at the end as well. So one thing I will say, I did update this a little bit this morning, because we updated it with new data that we found from 2023 data for Lowell. So the numbers that are in the printed version are a little bit different. They don't change dramatically, but just making sure you have the latest data. So in terms of an executive summary of this, the smokestack, like we all know, is an unreinforced, multi-wythe, 133-foot tall masonry smokestack. The outer wythe is very deteriorated, typical kind of freeze-thaw damage that you have for unreinforced masonry structures. Repairs would include, obviously, repointing the outer wythe, but also repairing displaced bricks, fallen bricks, et cetera. Even if the smokestack is repaired and everything is repointed, the bricks are replaced, it still doesn't meet the Massachusetts building code for seismic loads, which is not uncommon for most smokestacks. So the thing that makes this smokestack a little bit unique is that if it was to collapse, there's a lot that can be impacted by a collapse. Obviously, the school, public roadways, sidewalk, other active businesses. So the gist of what we found is that in the next 10 years, there's about this is where the numbers change a little bit, 7.7 to 9.6% chance that there could be an earthquake that could fail the smokestack. So we did look at, even though it wasn't really our charge, we did do just a preliminary wind analysis of the smokestack to see, does it meet code wind loads? So a hurricane comes through. It does. It looks like the smokestack just about calcs out for current code wind loads. So if I jump to the next page, the adjacencies page, this is essentially just an overview of the site with the different buildings in the area. The smokestack is in yellow here. And then if you flip to the next page, that diagram, that circle is about 130-foot radius. So if the smokestack was to collapse or partially fail, anything within that radius would be impacted. Or some things within that radius could be impacted. So, like I mentioned, we did do a hands-on inspection. We engaged a contractor. We got a 150-foot boom lift out here to actually put our hands on the smokestack. So it was pretty much a twofold purpose. Is one, we probably searched at least a half dozen areas to find, between UMass Lowell, the national park, various state agencies, to find existing drawings for the smokestack, to figure out how was it originally built, what kind of foundation it has. We weren't able to find anything. So part of getting the lift out there was so that we could measure the smokestack, get the dimensions, and actually run an accurate analysis of the smokestack. We were in the 150-foot boom lift. Every 10 feet, we would core about a 1-inch diameter hole through the smokestack, take measurements. We had a borescope with us to try to see what it looks like inside the smokestack. However, the gap between the liner and the smokestack outer structure was just filled with soot, so we really couldn't see anything once we actually drilled the hole. We were able to get through the entire outer structure. We'd sometimes bump into the liner, but we couldn't get all the way through the liner that's there. The wall of the smokestack structure at the base is about 28 inches thick. At the very top, it's about 18 inches thick. Like I mentioned, there's an air gap there, so you have the outer structure kind of tapers as you go up, and then there's essentially a flue that's in the middle. That's a standard circular diameter that goes straight up, not tapered. So there's an air gap. So at the base, the air gap's bigger, and then eventually that air gap tapers out to nothing, and the liner and the structure become one at the top. That happens at about roughly 40 feet up from the base of the smokestack. Like I mentioned, we were able to drill through the outer structure of the smokestack, but we could tap the liner, get through the air gap, part of the air gap. We could kind of tap the liner, but we couldn't get through it, so we don't know how thick the liner is. This next slide was it was an animation I had, but it was essentially a SketchUp that we did based on the dimensions we have that kind of shows like a flyby of the smokestack, but it's a pretty standard mill smokestack. It's got your outer structure, your outer brick structure, the air gap, and then you can see kind of the straight liner. And you can kind of see at I'm looking at the next page there with some of the red text. You can kind of see near the top how the liner and the structure kind of taper and meet each other. So jumping to the next page. So general condition of the smokestack. So like we kind of talked about here already, is the outer white needs to be repointed. There's a lot of mortar that's fallen off. Very typical freeze-thaw damage. There is some cracked masonry. It's not too bad. There aren't widespread cracks, so I mean that's good. There is some missing mortar. There's some displaced bricks. LeMessurier did a study and a drone survey of the smokestack as well. So we're obviously the second review of this. They estimated that about 80% of the smokestack requires repointing on the outside, and then resetting some bricks and reinstalling some bricks that have fallen. So if you jump to the next slide there, you can just see two pictures of the smokestack. And the one on the left, if you kind of look really close, you can see, not really close, but you can see there's a vertical crack right near the base of the smokestack. That's probably the worst crack in the smokestack. We didn't find anything when we got up on the lift. We didn't see anything else. For the most part, there is no major cracking in the stack.
Do you know how far up the crack runs?
I don't recall if we measured it, ballpark, it goes up 15 feet or so. And then if we jump to the next page here, just another summary. Like I think you know, LeMessurier did a drone survey back in March of here, and we did go through LeMessurier's photos, so we kind of have a twofold where we put our hands on there, but we also have a bunch of drone photos as well. We could only get from the lift, because the lift was in the parking lot, we could only get to certain sides of the smokestack, so we weren't able to get our hands all the way around the smokestack. So the drone photos helped to kind of fill in those gaps. Like we know, smokestack's 133 feet tall. About 2 feet of it was replaced when it was struck by lightning, and it's got a concrete cap on the top of it. So then look at the next page here, the objectives of our study. So the school asked us to determine, you can go through, repoint this, repair it, but what's the chance that an earthquake comes along, a week later, a month later, a year later, and could knock the smokestack down or severely damage it? So they wanted to know what was the answer to that question. Is it an earthquake that happens once every 10 years, 20, 30, 40? So that was essentially the charge of the second part of our work, was once we had enough information, dimensional information, could we determine what the likely return period of an earthquake is that could cause it to fail? So if you go to the next slide here, the way that we did this, I'll try not to go too deep into the engineering stuff unless you want me to, but the way we did this is we used procedures outlined in ASCE 41. It's a standard for designing and evaluating buildings for seismic effects. It's not used too much on the East Coast, just given the relatively low seismicity on the East Coast. So they tend to use more prescriptive procedures. It's used much more on the West Coast. It's called a performance-based design approach, where owners can actually pick and say, I want my structure to behave a certain way in a 50-year event or in a 200-year event. So that as long as at the end of the day you're protecting life safety, you can play around with how much damage am I willing to tolerate. So that's what this procedure lets you do. So this is the procedure that we used for the smokestack. It is a recognized procedure by the Massachusetts Building Code. So the code essentially says you can use the prescriptive requirements in the code, or you can use ASCE 41. So if you look at the next page, the assumptions that we made, these are essentially the major assumptions that we made. We don't know how thick the liner is at the base of the smokestack, so we assumed it was 4 whites where we couldn't get all the way through it. So we assumed that it's at the base at least, it's non-structural. Once the liner and the smokestack meet, they become in one composite structure. But down where there's the air gap, we assume they're not interacting with each other. We assumed the liner was intact, so the weight of the liner is relatively evenly distributed up the height of the smokestack. Like I mentioned, we don't know anything about the foundation here. So we don't know, is the foundation the weaker link, or is it just fine for this? So that is still a question mark. So we're assuming the foundation is okay for this study. And then the big unknown, which is common for all these smokestacks, is we don't know what type of structural mortar is in the smokestack. It could be a lime-based mortar, it could be a cement-based mortar. Realistically, it's probably some combination of the two. So we had to bound our analysis assuming the two. So the next page, looking at the analysis titled slide. So I'll try to kind of summarize what I'm showing here. So the graph on the left, these are what we call load displacement graphs. The graph on the left is what typical new construction is. And you can see that the line drags out really far to the right. There's a lot of jagged ups and downs in it, and kind of moves around a little bit there. What that essentially means is that the building code wants buildings to behave what we call ductily, right? So the building code wants the building that if it undergoes a significant load, that the building deforms, leans, displaces, but it doesn't collapse, right? It's essentially the building's way of telling you that it's in trouble, time to evacuate until it can be repaired. The graph on the right, the one that says the Appleton Mills smokestack, This is what the graph looks like for an unreinforced masonry structure that has little to no redundancy in it. This is very similar to how the Appleton Mill smokestack would behave. So essentially what this says is that if you follow the diagonal line up, the smokestack can resist loads just fine. It's going, it will, get loaded, unloaded. But once you exceed a certain threshold, the strength of the smokestack just collapses. It doesn't give you any warning. It doesn't give you any chance to evacuate the area. This is the building code. This is the same reason why unreinforced masonry structures are not allowed by the building code now, because it's not the best way to protect life safety. Jumping to the next slide, the mortar strength, ASCE 41 gives prescriptive values for what to use for the strength of lime mortar in tension and cement mortar in tension. You can see that there's a pretty big range, as low as 5 PSI or as much as 60 PSI. So like I said, we bounded our analysis. We used the lower number and the higher number. Jump to the next slide. Going on a little bit more about the mortar strength, ASCE 41 does have some adjustment factors that you apply based on the condition of the structure and what your inspection shows. So we applied those factors. So again, I'm including this just as background in case you were curious of how we arrived at this. Jumping to the next slide, the analysis slide. So like I mentioned, we bounded the analysis assuming cement mortar and assuming lime mortar. We performed what's called a linear elastic analysis, which is essentially how the smokestack would behave. We assumed it was fully repointed, fully repaired in our analysis, and the geotechnical conditions at the site, those play another big factor into the amplifications that buildings will go through from an earthquake. We assume the standard conditions that's allowed by the Mass Building Code if you don't know anything better, so, which is Site Class D. Jumping to the next slide. Just from a frame of reference here, I know I'm talking about lime and cement-based mortars. Prior to about 1870, lime mortars were predominantly used in masonry construction, and then after about 1900, it was predominantly cement-based mortars. In that 1870 to 1900 range, it was kind of a mix, kind of depended on the locale and what people had available. And the Appleton Mill was obviously constructed around 1870s-ish, right? The other thing that complicates the mortar strengths for our analysis is that this smokestack, it's 150 years old. It's been repointed multiple times over its life. Not to mention, it's usually the outer white has been repointed, probably more than any sort of inner white. Also freeze-thaw degradation, right? So maybe they do have the good cement mortar, but that cement mortar has been going through 50 years of freeze-thaw damage, and it really doesn't have that ideal design strength. So there's a lot of factors, that's why I'm kind of harping on the mortar side of it. If we jump to the analysis results one, and this is another one where the numbers are going to be a little bit different, just based on, we updated the data to use the latest data from ASCE 41. So what we did in terms of our analysis, we said, okay, we assume the two mortar strengths, let's figure out what is the seismic force that would cause this smokestack to fail. And then using that data, USGS publishes seismic maps for different areas, for different return period seismic events. So there's a graph that's for a 10-year return period, a 20-year return period, et cetera. So what we did is we took those seismic maps, calculated the seismic force from those, and we essentially back solved to see what map corresponds to what the smokestack can handle. And we did that both for if it was a lime-based mortar or a cement-based mortar. What we found is that we did also check the smokestack at various heights to see, is it just the top's the weakest, is the bottom the weakest? The bottom was the weakest in the smokestack. So if it was to fail, it would fail at the base. We found that a smokestack that has a return period between 100 and 145 years would fail the smokestack. So that's essentially saying that an earthquake that theoretically happens every 100 to 150 years could fail the smokestack. To put that in perspective, the design earthquake that we use in the Massachusetts Building Code theoretically should happen once every 2,500 years. So substantially less than what the building code would want you to design for. Jumping to the next one, this is probability of seismic event causing failure, the little graph. So again, this one's been updated. They just adjusted the lines based on our data. But when you say, okay, what are the odds? What's the probability of a 100-year return period earthquake happening or a 150-year return period earthquake happening? So that's what this graph shows. So essentially, in the next 10 years, the chance of one of those earthquakes occurring that could fail the smokestack is somewhere around a 7.7 to a 9.6% chance of occurring. Just for comparison's sake to the Massachusetts Building Code, the Massachusetts Building Code, the odds of its design earthquake, the 2,500-year return period earthquake happening, is 0.4% in the next 10 years. So we're talking orders of magnitude higher than what the building code would require. And then jumping to the next one here, this table, this is essentially just the graph, but in tabular form. So what this essentially shows is that the probability of exceedance for an earthquake to fail the smokestack is somewhere on the order to 16 to 25 times higher for the Appleton smokestack than what the Massachusetts Building Code wants. Okay, jumping to, so just as a reminder, back to the overall site plan here. Just shows, again, the 130-foot radius there, so if a portion of the smokestack was to fail, it's impacting something in this area, right? So the playground, the school, parking, businesses, et cetera. So then jumping to the next page, just wrap up a summary and conclusions. So again, earthquake, 100 years to 150-year return period would likely fail the smokestack. This is all assuming that the smokestack is repaired and repointed. The probability of that happening is 7.7 to 9.6% in the next 10 years. It's 15 to 18% in the next 20 years. And if the smokestack was to fail, the impact radius could obviously include the school, the playgrounds, the pedestrian areas, Middlesex Street, Garnett Street, businesses, and overhead utilities. And that's all I got.
Very, very quick question.
Sure.
Was there any USGS data for seismic activity in the greater Lowell area or within closer proximity to the Appleton?
I will check where they calculated it. They do have a lot of good data. I don't know how much you're familiar with the building codes, but when the new Massachusetts code, the 10th edition, took effect, actually the area kind of north of Lowell, northeast of Lowell, all saw a big spike in the design seismic load. So they do have a lot of good data in this area. It's actually creating that, seismic loads in this area have gone up, and that's reflected in the new building code.
So in other words, you could do a more accurate structural analysis, structural dynamic
Yeah.
for the chimney, okay.
Yeah, well, that's what we did. So we go to Lowell, we say Lowell, Appleton, Mills, and they give us the seismic maps in that area. Now, where they actually did like the different like calculations of the map, it's not going to be dramatically different, but this is exactly how you do it in the building code as well. So, okay, Greg, you're going to take us home, or?
And while Greg is getting ready, so following Mike's presentation, following Mike's presentation, in the packet is a sort of more detailed summary of our research with additional photographs of the mill and historic maps of the development of the Appleton Mill.
Great. Thank you, Doug.
Greg Walsh, PCA 360, we're the owner's project manager, working with Robert and Nick on the project. And I, again, want to thank everybody for your time this evening. I think that we're obviously interested on the first issue that we discussed tonight in getting some initial feedback from the board with regards to your thoughts on our proposed new project. It's something that, you know, we're quite excited about. We're still in the design development phase, so, you know, the images that we shared with you this evening are still, you know, somewhat preliminary in nature. As Pip did mention, you know, we are constrained a little bit by some of the materials that are being utilized in the nature of the building as a pre-engineered metal building. But we are certainly interested in working with the board and having your feedback and trying to incorporate that with our new project. So looking forward to that. On the second topic of the smokestack, you know, we hope that we answered some of your questions from the last time that we met with you in terms of going back and doing a little additional research, both on the historic features of the building and the context for the smokestack within the national park area, to also address some of your concerns. I know that, you know, there was a sentiment that the maintenance or the repairs of the smokestack would be a very significant financial undertaking for the school, and I know that everybody was interested in knowing whether there were any other additional resources that we could tap into to help to pay for that. And I think, you know, Doug did a nice job of trying to see if there were things that we could do. I think probably the community preservation funds are the only really meaningful place where we might be able to seek some additional help. But still in all, that only addresses a portion of the cost of not only sort of stabilizing, if you will, for lack of a better term, the mill in its current condition, but then there's the ongoing ownership and maintenance of it as it relates to, you know, the operating costs for the school. So that's something that we're concerned about. And I think probably if there's anything that came out of this sort of next round of investigation was really the risk that the smokestack presents, not just to the school, but to the community at large. You know, we all know that New England, you know, people don't tend to think of New England as being a place that has earthquakes. You know, everybody says California is the king of earthquakes. But the reality is that we are pretty seismically active, and there have been a few seismic events in just the past few years. So to find out that the stack would, you know, potentially fail and catastrophically fail, I might say, you know, was certainly eye-opening for us, and I know it presents a tremendous concern for the school with 815 students, you know, in the building or playing in the playgrounds. And so, you know, if anything, when we came to you in the summer, we were concerned about it, and we talked about the fact that it's more expensive to insure. It has to be insured separately from the school. You know, and there were certainly a sense that it was not a safe thing, but if anything, this additional study has now sort of confirmed the concerns that the school had earlier on, that maintaining the stack, you know, presents a real risk, both, as I said, to the school, but to the community at large. And so we're hoping that this was helpful to you. I know you have to deliberate on that, and so we're certainly looking forward to your deliberations, but I hope that this information was helpful, and we'll shed a little more light on what we as the owner are concerned about. So thank you again for your time. We certainly look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Great, thank you. And, you know, thank you to all for this presentation and this packet of information. This really is a wealth of information and explains a lot. Really brings a lot to all of us. I speak for myself, not for the board, but I would like to open it up to the board for any questions that haven't been asked during the presentation.
I have 3 questions related to the new construction, so not at all about the smokestack. 1, wondering what the height of the decorative fence is in the play area in the front. 2, wondering why you've set back the entrance from Middlesex Street. It seems like you're like walking through like the building and the play area before you get to the main entrance, and just like wondering why that isn't on Middlesex Street. And 3, trying to understand for the steel, like the actual gym building itself, and I think I had the same exact question when you guys came across the street with the building design, which is, if I see a little gray-scaled person on the sidewalk, and so it seems like there's a really big plain wall really high up. And so just wondering like what, from like how high up is the first window edge on that like building, just to try to understand like from a pedestrian scale, are they gonna be walking by like a 40-foot blank metal wall when they're going down Middlesex Street? So those are just the three questions that I had.
Okay, and I'll try to answer them in order, and if I forget something, just remind me. So the fence, the solid part of the fence is 6 feet high. We know that we have to stay at or below 6 feet. And then there's a netting that we are extending up above that. I'm not sure of the height of the netting, maybe 15 feet. And that is to keep basketballs from, so it's a mostly transparent thing, to keep basketballs from going out into the street. You see those at tennis courts and things like that. The building, the gymnasium building really just barely squeezes into the site. We had, one of our main charges was to see if we get a full competition basketball court in with all the proper dimensions, and then seating for approximately 400 students in the, or spectators on the bleachers. And so to do that, we had to push the front face of the building very close to Middlesex Street. I think it's less than 2 feet away from the property line. And even doing that gave us a very narrow courtyard that you see just to the north of the athletic building, kind of between the athletic building and the mill. And so that is close enough so that we have to provide fire protection on that wall of the new athletic building. And it's about 20 feet away. Is that 16 feet away from the mill building? So we were trying to squeeze things in as much as possible. And that explains why we pulled the entrance off of Middlesex Street, because we needed area for doors to swing open. We needed areas for handicap ramps and things like that to make the building fully accessible. And we quickly saw that we didn't have the space to do that between, directly onto Middlesex Street. So our attempt is to create this entrance area that pulls students off of Middlesex Street. It's sort of indicated by these storefront windows that you see on the corner there, so that we think we are suggesting openness and entrance into the building. I think that that's going to work a lot better than if we were trying to actually put the entrance on Middlesex Street. Now, we actually did a design of the building which had windows down just about at the street level. And we talked with the school, and we elected that what we wanted to do was to raise the windows up a bit, because so the students will get daylight through the windows, and they'll get the sense of sun from on 2 sides of the building, or actually 3 sides of the building. So it should be a bright, a sunny space. But we thought that we have windows right on the street at the entrance lobby of this space, essentially. And the gymnasium itself, we elected to not have any windows right there, so that people would not be looking through the windows directly at the children.
So how high up?
It is, I'm going to say that it is, looks like 8 feet. Is that right? This is my wealth of information over here. Yes. All right, 8 or 9 feet, okay. And that is, as Greg pointed out, this is a preliminary design that can move up or down at this point without a problem.
So I'm just going to follow up, I think with literally the same comment I had last time, which is that makes sense, not to have like people poking their heads in while kids are at gym, but like as a pedestrian, that the entire length of the gym, a few small windows, and then the entire length of the play area is going to be essentially like a not interactive plain sort of wall moment for pedestrians. And so
I will.
I don't
say-
have a
I
suggestion
will
other
say
than
that
I'm just saying that out loud. to
Okay,
be
I will
honest.
say that the fence itself around the playground is actually a pretty playful fence. It has figures in different colors on it and things like that. They don't show that here, but our landscape architects have designed that, and that's been shown to the school and priced out and things like that. So the fence is opaque at that level because, again, we don't want the view of the students playing in the playground. But we are making it a colorful, playful fence enclosure. We like to make our buildings feel like school buildings as opposed to, an office building or something like that.
Sure, thank you. Any other questions from the board?
So for me personally, it's really tough to approach this problem because I really wish you had come to us with the question of the smokestack separately from your clear wishes to take over the smokestack space. It's really hard for me to not feel like there was nobody on team keep the smokestack from the moment the building was acquired. And that's not a sin, but it makes it hard not to feel like there's nothing, like there's nobody in the ownership of the building that is hoping to preserve these elements that are historic, which is tough because our job here is to preserve historic elements. Now, it's not wrong for you guys to want to use your property the way you want to use it. Obviously, that's a key part of property ownership is wanting to utilize it to its fullest. But our obligation is to history and to people in the future as well as people in the present moment. So it's hard for me to balance what are clearly your strong wishes with our obligation to preserve history. It's very seldom that we've really okayed the destruction of something. It's a rare thing that we do. And it's not something that I personally would vote for lightly. It's clear that you've done a lot of work here, and I really respect the thoughtfulness of it. But I do really wish I was able to just consider the safety of the smokestack without looking at a plan for what you want to do next. And, there's another building, too, that you also want to knock down. That's another case that you'll need to make separately. I think, certainly I'm not personally interested in being a person who comes off as not caring about school children being crushed by bricks. Obviously, that is a concern. I think you've made a good case that the smokestack needs to be considered from a safety element. One question I have is about how, when you presented these earthquake diagrams, how does that compare to other smokestacks? As opposed to other, the building code currently obviously is for a modern thing being built now.
I would have to check exactly numbers to numbers. In general, it's about what typical smokestacks are. It's tough to do a one-for-one comparison because different smokestacks have wider bases and might be taller, so it's a lot depends on how the mass is distributed. It's about in that range for this height of smokestack, given the thicknesses. It's not like this is exceptionally worse or exceptionally better than a normal smokestack, but it's tough to compare them all to each other.
Now, you've noted that this one is freestanding, which is kind of unusual. So one question I have is, could we do more at the base of the smokestack to make it safer? If historically there was a structure right along the smokestack, could we put something there that would make the smokestack safer?
Theoretically, you could. What you end up doing is as you strengthen the base, all you're doing is just pushing the problem up on the smokestack, right? So it makes it, obviously these charts get a little bit better by strengthening the base. However, it's not like you're going to get this to be like a lot closer to the mass building code. It's still got quite a ways to go from that standpoint. But yes, you could do something to strengthen either, putting some sort of surrounding structure on there that's integral with the smokestack. But it still doesn't change too much the fact that if something did fall off, it's the radius that the smokestack encompasses is pretty large.
Then I guess something I would want to know more about, and I have no idea who is going to do this research for me, is how that compares to the other smokestacks, and that, clearly we've decided that it's okay to have a smokestack even though they're not something we would build now. So does this one represent a significantly higher risk, or?
Tough to answer that question.
Yeah.
Without doing that, without obviously doing the analysis, what's the geometry of all the other smokestacks in the area, vintage of construction, how they're constructed, et cetera. So it's tough to answer that question. There's a lot that goes into, how much money the smokestack requires in terms of maintenance and whatnot, and is it a historic element? And, there are smokestacks that have been retrofitted, but it changes the architectural character of the smokestack substantially when you do that. We have done a bunch of research in Canada, out in Wyoming area, where brick smokestacks have been, but it gets extremely costly quickly, and it changes the entire aesthetic character of the smokestack to the point where it doesn't look like a brick smokestack anymore.
I would love to see some options along those lines. I think there's not a lot of compromises I'm not willing to consider. I think if you look at the work this board has done, we've allowed a lot of alterations to historic structures for practical reasons, to ensure that the building to ensure that various buildings had a viable life. We've made a lot of different compromises, and I think we're not closed to new ideas. But active destruction of a historic structure is a tough sell for us, generally, at least for me personally, and I think for us, it's unusual that we okay the destruction of a historic structure. Doesn't mean we wouldn't do it, but I just want to make clear that this is a tough pitch. One thing I just want to express sympathy for is that some of what you're dealing with here is just that this is a historic structure that you have not been responsible for the maintenance of up until less than a year ago. And so I recognize that some of what you're dealing with is a choice, you're not the one who didn't repoint the smokestack previously. And I recognize that that's a real challenge, that when you take over a building like this, it comes with a lot. But on the other hand, if you were coming to us because what you wanted to do with this historic building is, plant rows of corn, we would say no, because, if you bought a historic building hoping to plant rows of corn, that would be a bad choice that you made to buy the historic building to try to turn it, we're not going to say yes to everything just because you have a historic building and you want to use it in a different way. So while we can be sympathetic, ultimately buying a building with historic character and within the historic guidelines does come with responsibility that is just kind of inescapable. Again, it doesn't mean that we might not be open to hearing different things, but I think that it is a difficult path. It is the path of historic building ownership that it is challenging. So I guess for me, the biggest question I have is about how the safety issues compared to other smokestacks, because I would want to hear that it's something unique. I think one thing that you have definitely made the case for is that that this structure needs to be repointed probably quickly. So that may not be the ideal case to have made, but I think probably one thing we may need to do is figure out, well, if this is an unsafe structure, how do we make it safe temporarily while this process goes on?
Just related to the unsafeness of what I wouldn't say that the smokestack is unsafe and requires immediate repairs or anything like that. The purpose of repointing is long-term maintenance. There's still, it's still 28 inches thick of brick at the base, and maybe you're missing a half inch or an inch of mortar on one side. It affects the strength, but it doesn't dramatically affect the strength. So it's definitely more of a maintenance item, because if you don't repoint it, then you're just kicking the can down the road. Now some of the bricks might start to fall out, and that's just more maintenance you'd have to do. But I wouldn't characterize it as a structurally unsafe in need of immediate repairs.
The analysis was done based on the assumption that it was repointed.
Correct, yes. The analysis was done assuming it was repointed, yes.
So the seismic events in the repointing are not necessarily that well tied together. The stack itself, if it were fully repointed, still represents a very high risk of fires.
Yeah, I'd like to, first of all, thank you all. And I really appreciate your, especially the structural engineer, the very calm, measured analysis of what you found. You didn't come here, with the notion, emphasizing the sky is falling. I think you've given a very good, sober analysis. One thing I do think going forward is, and I was a bit surprised, although I appreciated the comprehensive nature of your presentation, I really wasn't prepared to see these different elements. I'm thinking about, first of all, the chimney stack on the one hand, and then the new construction on the other. Aurora did mention, as far as new construction goes, there's some elements I think we need to think about. One is the demolition of the turbine building. But that's to say, to me, these are obviously very related in the development. I can understand that. But I think for us to carefully think about both parts, I think that we'll have to figure out how we want to, move ahead on that. Because I do think that in some ways these are for the historic board some separate issues, new design versus existing structures, how we deal with this, very important historic structure, the stack, but I appreciate the real problems that you are facing and the city's facing. So that said, I think going forward, I think we might want to figure out how we want to analyze this.
No, that's a great question. And, I had a note here just to ask Steve, just from a procedural perspective, would this be two permits, one for the destruction, one for the new construction, or is this all in one? How would this look going forward?
Well, technically, under the standards, it says applications for demolition must be accompanied by the plans for what's going to replace it. So it's actually a combined effort here. It's separate, but together, if that makes sense.
Well, it's two different events, but it's all in one.
Mm-hmm.
So
Correct.
at the end of the day, it ends up being one approved permit with multiple conditions. regarding both.
Yeah, this would be very, I'm trying to think of a recent project. It would be maybe like the homes at Tyler Park where the Legion Hall was approved for demolition and the design for the new homes approved at the same time. That's something I could equate it to.
Okay. No, that's very helpful, thank you.
These are very good questions that you raise, and I think, when we came to you back in July, we really just came with the notion of, addressing the smokestack, even though we were, at the time, working on plans for the gym. And part of that was because, at the time, we thought that keeping the issues discreetly separated was the better approach to having sort of two separate conversations, if you will. And then I think as we got, further down the path, the idea was to come in and bring both of these things together. I think it's important to note that there's sort of like three elements to this discussion, right? The smokestack is one thing, and if all things were equal and the smokestack was, we didn't have any concerns about the smokestack doesn't have to be taken down in order to build the gym. If you go back and you look at your plans, you'll see that the gym can fit on the site and the smokestack can coexist with it. So the creation of the gym doesn't demand the destruction of the smokestack. So those two things are sort of unique and separate and two different conversations. What is the new building going to look like from a historic board perspective, and then what do we do about the smokestack? But then the third element that sort of comes into this is that what does need to be demolished as part of the gym project is the turbine building. And so that's sort of another, technical piece of the new project, right? So they all sort of end up coming sort of somewhat together, woven together, but the stack and the gym are really two separate items, whereas the turbine house and the gym are really one discussion, right? They're two discussions within a single discussion, right? So, I don't know if that helps to, sort of clarify things for folks, but we did think that, presenting everything to you this evening was a way to start the conversation, if you will, because we have a couple of things to discuss and try and work together on and come up with solutions on.
Okay,
Just if I could make a few comments. So regarding the lobby area, you had asked some questions about the windows as a pedestrian. And so one piece that we didn't point out specifically is that we are planning to relocate a steam engine that's currently in the turbine building from the late 1800s into this lobby area. So it'd be visible from the public view from Middlesex Street. And that's a big part of why you see the storefront on Middlesex Street. And we're excited about that because it really highlights the historic significance of the Appleton Mill complex. And we will, as I mentioned at the last meeting, we will be educating 1,000 people a day, 815 people a day, 150 educators, over 500 families, and really want to emphasize the fact that they are being educated and served in a historic building in the historic downtown Lowell. And if anybody wanted to save the smokestack, it was me. As somebody who's lived here my entire life, and I'm proud to send my kid in this school, trust me, the mill has caused me more headaches and restless nights than any of these fine folks. I spent a lot of time there dealing with issues, but when we took ownership of it, we looked at the structure. I'm not a structural engineer, but I saw cracks, I saw bricks falling, and we looked at an assessment that said it should be demolished within 2 years. We've shared that with you folks, and then went back and did some additional work. And as you mentioned, as Greg mentioned, it can exist without impacting our construction of our new gym and playground. It's in our playground right now. But the reality is when we build a gym and an additional playground, the question we have to think about is, are we putting more kids at risk by building in this area where there's a 10% chance of a seismic event that's going to cause a failure within the next 10 years. And as someone whose daughter attends the school, I don't want to put anybody at that, in that position. And if we raise $250,000 to repoint the structure, it will look a lot better, but it doesn't eliminate that risk that we've recently discovered with this process. But you know, as the team also mentioned, we folded these two presentations together. One, because of where we are in the process of the new building planning. We're finalizing design development. We'd like to start working with Steve and with the board on some input so we can further our design. And at the same time, we're struggling with what to do with the smokestack. We want to figure out how can we make sure that our students, our staff, our families, and the greater Lowell community are safe with this structure in place as we plan for the new construction. Because at the end of the day, that's the most important thing to us, is how can we ensure that there's a safe space for our students and families, and we're faced with this issue. And we're happy to work with you folks on coming up with a solution. But I wanted to mention the turbine, the steam engine as a cool, unique way to elevate a feature that's been hidden for 100 years. And not that the smokestack isn't a great artifact to put on display, but this is a one-of-a-kind item that will be, you know, visible to the general public, but also incorporated into what we do each and every day for our kids. So, thank you.
I have one more question, I lied. Sorry, one more question. You have on here the 200, I thought I pressed that, sorry. Approximately $250,000 for ongoing maintenance. What does that mean? What is that maintenance? Is that the repointing at one time? Or is that like the thing you're signing up for forever and ever? Just trying to understand what that actually represents.
I wasn't,
So the repointing is about $500,000. I think the 250 that was put together is continuously repointing, replacing brick, as well as the insurance costs for insuring the stack as a standalone piece of property. So that's what comes up with the $250,000.
Okay, great. I was just trying to make sure I understood whether or not that represented like a pretty regular cost that you all would be dealing with, or if it was like you do this once and you're good.
Yep.
And that seems like that's not the truth.
There'll be an ongoing cost to deal with the portions that have not been reported.
I had a question on the new gymnasium. On the roof, will there be HVAC stuff on top of the roof? And if so,
Yeah, I think I've been working on this long enough to answer for the architect. On the gymnasium itself, there will be no mechanicals. The mechanicals will be on the lower building, which will have screening along the side, so you wouldn't be able to see any of the mechanicals from Middlesex Street.
thank you. And then my next question is just on one of the diagrams, the one in black and white, it has the gymnasium building coming halfway up, the second to last story of the old building. And then the adjacent photo looks like it's just beneath the windows. So I just wondered where the gymnasium actually ended when you put it against that building.
The difference in height that you're seeing is not actually a difference in height. It's just a difference in the angle that the perspective is taken from. And this is all done with a computer model, so it's all the same thing. The height of the building is determined by what we need for for the play space in the basketball court, plus we have mechanical running through it, and the mechanical, the structural bent frames that will support the roof. And that has given us this particular height that comes to, as it is. We could give you, when we're reviewing this, we have elevation, we have elevations and sections so that you can see the exact heights of things and exactly where they hit the windows across at the mill number 5. But they are not, it's not varying in height. It's a certain height, probably 35 feet or a little bit more than that at the low point. 35 feet, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, something like that, and it sort of comes up above the third floor, the fourth floor of the mill, so, yeah, it's, the back end is slightly above those windows on the wall.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, do you know if Jeffrey has any questions? Okay.
Jeffrey, do you have anything?
Yes, there's a couple things. I'm sorry I missed out on some of the early parts of the presentation and some of the earlier comments, so I may be repeating some things. I guess with respect to the design of the proposed gymnasium and other elements, I appreciate the axonometric view that's shown in the presentation, kind of showing it from above to get us a sense of the massing and layout of the proposed new construction. But I think it would be very valuable to have some renderings done showing the view of these proposed buildings from the pedestrian level, which is where everyone will be experiencing these from the general public standpoint. Yeah, I share some of the concerns that were raised by one of the other board members about the kind of extent of blank walls along the sidewalk edge that would be part of this design. You know, when you go up and down Middlesex Street, it's a very, the buildings along there are very engaging to the pedestrians. Lots of storefronts and windows and entrances. And at this point in time, I realize it's kind of hard to envision this because so much of this area around this block is currently undeveloped, but I would hope that the eventual redevelopment of the blocks would have a similar level of pedestrian engagement that we have with the historic buildings that are still remaining there. And this really kind of goes against that, and there'd be long stretches of facades that just don't engage with the public at all. And I understand that the proposed use for these structures prevents you from having, having those openings and opportunities to have people coming and going. But it's something that we, from a design standpoint, if we get to this point down the road, we definitely want some exploration of looking at massing and other ways that we can break up that mass a little bit to make it a little more engaging to the pedestrian. I think having those perspective views from the pedestrian level would help us to better understand how those buildings would be experienced, and also to better see how they would relate to the other buildings in the area, not just the mill buildings behind it. With respect to the smokestack, again, I don't know if this was addressed, but I know there were some comments about the seismic issues with this current smokestack, and I could echo the questions that were raised about how does this particular smokestack compare to others in the city in terms of the level of danger and whatnot. And I know that there was, in the Epsilon report, there was some analysis of the other existing historic smokestacks around the city. And then I'm curious to know whether how many, if any, of those smokestacks, as part of their preservation and retrofitting, have received seismic stabilization such that they are safe, or that they meet the current seismic codes. I don't have a sense of how much work has been done on those other smokestacks, and that would be helpful to have that information in context for this discussion. And not to say that we're automatically going to accept the demolition of the smokestack, but I would be curious if there's been any exploration of creative ways in which the base or a portion of the smokestack could be incorporated into the design of the new building, such that there is some remnant of the structure potentially, if it's full height, cannot be feasibly preserved. There's been efforts made to look at ways in which some element of this historic brick structure could be preserved and incorporated into the development of the site. And I realize that it may present issues with where you envision the playground, but I'd be interested to hear some feedback on that particular piece. But again, I'm sorry that I wasn't able to be here for the full presentation. I will definitely watch the rebroadcast, and if there are other issues that come up as I look at that, I'll certainly pass those on to you in a timely manner.
Okay, this is Pip Lewis, the architect, and I can't answer all of your questions about engaging the base of the smokestack because I'm not a structural engineer. But in terms of the perspectives from the street level, we have done those. We sort of limited the number of things that we put into this particular presentation, but we certainly have those, and they could be actually provided to you pretty quickly. And in terms of the let's call it the animation of the facade of the gymnasium, the big massive gymnasium, I will go out on a limb with the clients standing here to say that we have done on many of our schools some graphics that can be done pretty inexpensively and applied to the base, so that as you're walking along the sidewalk, you're seeing some graphic indication that, hey, this is a school here. We haven't designed that yet, so I can't say exactly what it would be. We have an excellent graphic designer in our office who usually does something for every project that we do, and we could focus on working out some things with the client here along the sidewalk that sort of takes the playfulness of the fence that is already in the design and sort of carries it as an applique to the metal panel of the gymnasium.
Sorry, I have one other thing. I keep saying that, and then I keep talking more. But one thing that dawned on me as I was looking through this book, which I do think, again, decisions aren't being made tonight. This is all for further discussion, but I do think is, important to note. But the comparative analysis page that they've identified a number of existing smokestacks, those are, housing projects, which have access to very different money to get developed, and tax credits. Commercial projects, which also have access to very different money in order to get developed, and a literal museum mill. And so, to the point of just thinking about how this aligns with other things that exist in Lowell, I think, I don't know. To me, that was just an interesting thing to note, that all of the projects, Mass Mills is one that's right in front of us now, in front of the city right now for funding for a housing project. All of these projects have the ability to get access to funding that this project specifically just does not qualify for. Obviously, housing tax credits, not building any housing, or historic, or new market tax credits, which is a thing that commercial developers often tap into when they're creating jobs, and this just doesn't have access to that. And so I do think it's important when we think about other people have done it. Yes, other people have done it for very different types of buildings, and so just again, of note for me, as I was looking at this, that kind of jumped out to me, that this is literally a very different kind of thing. And so some of the things that I think we as a board have seen in front of us, and that have people been able to figure out in the past, is just really more limited in this scenario.
Yeah, I just want to echo what you just said. As someone who's been in education, this is my first time speaking before a historic board. But, when you think, when the public thinks about school building projects, all we hear for our entire lives is large-scale projects that are hundreds of millions of dollars. And all of that is underwritten by, as Robert mentioned just briefly, the Mass School Building Authority underwrites that. And I want to stress that this entire project budget right now is less than half of what just the overrun was on the Lowell High projects. So, the entire budget we have to build what we hope to build is $20 million. And that's why we're using pre-engineered metal buildings. And that's why you see charter schools all using pre-engineered metal buildings, because it's all we can afford. And so we have to save our money every year in order to even afford the mortgage that we're looking at for this building. And so I really appreciate what you said. It just puts it in a context that I think, nobody really thinks about that.
Mike Hughes again. Jeffrey, I just want to respond to, I think, some of your comments about trying to tie the structure, either two structures together or trying to lower the smokestack. I guess if I tackle lowering the smokestack first, it's obviously an option. It's possible, what I've seen before is some of the bricks get salvaged and reused elsewhere as some sort of memorial to it and gets reincorporated elsewhere on the site. From a seismic risk standpoint, what actually happens is the smokestack is essentially a tall piece of spaghetti up in the air, right? And as you lower it, so let's say if you took 15, 20, 30 feet off of it, the smokestack, actually that piece of spaghetti gets stiffer now, right? And as it gets stiffer, the seismic forces go up. So it's a little bit of chicken and an egg thing where you really have to lower it a lot to get it down to something that's, maybe not code compliant, but reasonably low risk. So that's why because that's a question I've studied on several other smokestacks is can we just lop off half of it and make it code compliant? And it's really got to come down pretty far. So that is an option. And then in terms of if there was to be some sort of tie between the new pre-engineered metal building and the smokestack, I'm not the structural engineer record for the pre-engineered building. I have designed multiple ones before. They're a very flexible system compared to a heavy masonry structure. So to tie the two together to somehow improve the smokestack would be, it gets to be a really challenging situation because you have to look at the stiffnesses of what's the stiffness of the smokestack, what's the stiffness of a flexible pre-engineered metal building, and does one brace the other one, or does the new building actually rely on the smokestack to resist loads, right? So it's a complicated problem to solve when you start trying to weave two systems together like that. So can anything be done with enough time and money? Of course, but I think it would add a significant complexity and cost to the project to try to do that.
One final comment for me. The more we talk about these engineering issues, the more I feel really underqualified. I don't know if other people are feeling that way. It's seldom that another thing that we don't end up getting asked about a lot is a safety issue. And so I personally don't feel very qualified to review the engineering, and I'm wondering if there's any way we could call in, as this goes forward, additional know-how, or whether other people on the board feel qualified to review that, or whether other city experts could help review that. When you talk about earthquake risk, I just have no context for that. Like, what is the earthquake risk of this building we're in now? What's the earthquake risk of the mill number 5? Like, I just truly feel underqualified to evaluate that element of it, and I would love to have a little more context as we go forward.
I mean, And Johnny, you can answer this as well. The city does not have a structural engineer. It only has civil engineers, okay? The one person that, I mean, could be relied upon maybe to take a quick look at this, who's got some experience in this, would be David Lieb, the National Park Architect. However, what's happening this week, we don't know with the federal government still being closed. Beyond that, it's a matter of additional consultants to perhaps do a peer review. I know, Gray, you've got some background in this, but that's, you know.
I'm a former structural engineer, but I'm not qualified to make any judgment.
Yeah, I mean, what happens when there are questions in front of our other land use boards that like start creeping into the territory of like an average staff person, you know, can have some general comments, but really can't make decisions like in the weeds. We do often ask for a peer review. And so I think that if that was something that like people felt strongly about, like there is a path forward and a mechanism by which like that happens often here in the city for other different types of projects. So I think like if the board got to a place where there was like a decision being made or in advance of a decision, if like we wanted some additional support to like try to understand information that is being presented, I would say that's something that like we could ask Steve to like help coordinate like either a peer review that like we bring on. Sometimes those peer reviews are the project itself actually funds the cost of that peer review. So I think there's like different ways that it has happened here in the city, but like, yes, we find ourselves in this situation a lot where like we're presented a bunch of information and people aren't totally sure. And peer review is something that we've utilized, at least for other boards. To be fair, it's not something that we've done on the historic board since I've been on it, but it's certainly something that the city has done with other land use boards, for sure.
Yeah, and one other thing before it slips my mind, and you know, not that we're predetermining the loss of the smokestack. This is just informational tonight. But to Jeffrey's point about the remnant of a smokestack, just to point out something, the height is whatever it ultimately is determined maybe in the end. But I can point you to a section of National Park Canal Walkway very near the charter school at Swamp Locks, where there's the base of the former Lowell Machine Shop smokestack that was actually reconstructed on its former location. It's only a couple of feet tall and serves as a low seating wall. So that's just as an example of a nearby item that could be looked at down the road if that's the route that ends up going.
I'll just respond quickly. Yep. So I totally appreciate the fact that a lot of this can seem, you know, very technically complicated and whatnot. So I totally understand the question. To put it, just to give you a little bit of context of, you know, I do a lot of work with historic buildings. A building like this is substantially better than the smokestack. Really, there's really two factors. Number one is it's really heavy and it's stout. Smokestack obviously isn't. So that helps a lot in terms of seismic performance of buildings. The other part too is there are a lot of walls here. So it's the technical term we use is redundancy. So there's a lot of ways that if an earthquake hits, there's ways for weight and loads to shift around. The problem with smokestacks is it doesn't have any of that. It's tall and skinny, and it's got one fuse at the base. Whereas this building, even though it's unreinforced masonry, it still has multiple fuses, so it will perform better than the smokestack. So just a little bit of context.
Yeah, just abstractly, I honestly can't say how little I think about earthquakes. So it's interesting to spend some time thinking about it.
Okay, any other questions from the board? No, again, this has been very, very informative. I appreciate this. We encourage you to work with Steve with questions on design review to kind of learn the lanes of where to be. You know, come back for another informational session if you feel the need to, or we look forward to seeing this come before us as a project for review. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Okay, continuing on, Steve, we have enforcement actions and violations update.
Okay. Let's see. The one thing I'm requesting is the issuance of it's not an order for compliance letter, it's actually an order to appear. This would be for Boost Mobile, located directly across the street, who unfortunately is one of the very few who sometimes don't respond to even multiple visits. So I'm requesting a vote that Boost Mobile come and appear before the board at its next meeting in December for a violation hearing regarding the 2 TV screen signs located in the front window.
Sure, and just before we go, call for that motion, what happens when when they appear?
It actually is a public hearing where we describe the nature of the violation, and then you decide if their violation or violations exist. In this case, there are 3, and if you determine that they exist, then you're able to vote on the violations and then the fines for each violation, which can be $100 per day per violation.
Okay.
With the goal being, of course, just to have them remove or turn off what it is.
Steve, sorry, what's the location of this?
Directly across the street from us at 376 Merrimack Street, next to the Viet Thai restaurant.
Okay.
Can I ask a logistical question?
Of course.
Why is it an order to appear in front of the group? Couldn't there just be they have giant TVs in the window,
Right.
which I think people can
Which have
just
been-
see. So just trying to figure out
well,
order of operations,
okay.
kind of how does this?
First step is the request for compliance under the board's process. That's initiated by myself, and that's usually only after I've stopped by a couple of times. By the 3rd time, I'm still looking at it a week later, and enough's enough. So the request was sent. You have a copy of that in the packet. The next step is the order to appear. There used to be additional steps back in late in 21. We revised it to streamline it even more because you'd send out an order for compliance. 7 days later, a second order. Months go by before they even would come to the board. This way, it cuts to the chase. Yeah.
So wait, I'm sorry. You need a vote.
So
A
we need a
motion
motion.
to read or to basically say that Boost Mobile at 376 Merrimack Street is to appear before the board's next meeting, at the board's next meeting on December, what is it? The December meeting.
Okay. I'd like to call for a motion to request that Boost Mobile from 376 Merrimack Street appear in front of this board at the next December meeting.
Second.
That would be so moved. Second one. Chair can't make the motion.
Yes.
I'll second it then.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Once in a while, you just get one that doesn't want to, and they're very nice. They're very nice in there, and I leave my business card 3 times, and no response, no phone call, so that's appreciated. The rest of the administrator's report here, let me see. One thing I'll note under projects that are currently in review, it happened so long ago, I forgot to put it in, but in 2018, the board approved the rehab of 484 Merrimack up here across from Santander Bank, the former Royal Theater. It's also known as the Husson Building, better known as probably the building of the giant, the 3-story tall rusty bay windows. That's now moving along after some starts and stops and starts finally. And it's the bay windows have been repainted. I was able to connect the developer, who's Patrick Ty, to do work with Nick Saris on the storefronts. And Nick Saris most recently locally did the ones at 51 Market where the pop-up is the city has, and also the Pizzelle Bakery next to Warp and Weft. So you know you're going to get the quality work and how it should be detailed properly. So based upon what the board approved back then, the storefronts are being based upon those, including 2 replica stone piers, complete with wood scoring. So it'll look like stacked concrete blocks, not concrete, stone blocks where they were, but they'll be wood and then painted to look like stone, very much like where M2 D2 Credit Union is. There's a granite sign band and it transitions to metal, then back to granite. Well, the metal's painted gray, same as the Wentworth block by Subway. It's a sleight of eye trick that it continues the same appearance, but it's not the same material. So that's moving along quite well. The coming up on the heels of 22 Hurd Street last month, informational. In December, there'll be an informational on 43 Fletcher Street. Some of you know it as the Furies Bar. That will be for, again, this is a blast from the past as well. There's been no review on this since 2017, and that was with Rachel Edlund, who some of you know, former on the historic board, and Charlie Tenetti, the former park architect. We'd gotten into design review, 1 or 2 meetings, and demolition with a new residential structure, so it's more housing. Nothing had happened. It's now a new owner, and the architect is Barry Gannick, who some of you may be familiar with. We've done projects with him before around downtown, so that'll be coming in for an informational. And then in January, we'll have an informational for 564 Dutton / 22 Fletcher Street. It's Dunkin' Donuts over by the canal on Western Ave over here. The owner wants to get rid of the Dunkin' Donuts and build a new residential building 4 to 5 stories tall there. And it also involves demolition of part of an historic structure or 2. So that'll be another thing that will be coming up on that one. We met with them on a preliminary level last week. They checked in with zoning, they checked in with me. John Geary's the attorney. And so they're still getting some ducks in a row, especially with Dunkin' Donuts and the lease that's there and all. So they wanted to wait till January to come in to kind of give you all a sense of what they're thinking of.
Are you legally allowed to remove a Dunkin' Donuts in Massachusetts?
Well, you won't have to make that a condition of approval because Dunkin' will be relocated to the first floor of the new building. So you only have a year gap maybe when there won't be a Dunkin', but you know there are plenty others around.
There'll be Dunkin' deprivation in the city of Lowell. This could be a dangerous place.
Yeah. But I just to see which route we're going to go. I know I got you the initial preliminaries as well as Jeffrey, so we decided, and Jeffrey suggested informational. Let's do it.
Sounds good.
So sun sign's done. You can look out the window. That's all wrapped up and lit. So then we move on to the next project, which is working with former city manager Brian Martin, as you see on the Shed Park entry. Hopefully that's going to bear some fruit, gain some estimates to help him out on that. A really great event last week was at UMass Lowell, Dr. Marie Frank, and this oral history project with Jackie Maloney. And it was well attended, and some of the interviews still aren't up yet. Gray, you might be familiar with this? Yeah, it was a really fantastic event. It was Marie and Jackie Maloney moderated a panel with Marty Meehan, Jay Linehan, and George Duncan. And it was just a nice event to kind of kick off the announcement that this project's been going on for the past 2 years. The last thing I'll note is that the Hildreth Building's windows are getting installed. So the apartments up there, the 50 units, are moving right along. But more importantly, most recently, the Mill 5 people, now known as some of them as the Hive Public Marketplace, we opened 2 weeks ago down there, and it's amazing how many people have discovered the place. And I was in there on Thursday on another matter. People were in there on a weekday afternoon, and on Saturday, before I headed out somewhere else, I stopped in. Unbelievable the numbers of folks I saw in there. Giovanni was down there, and she can corroborate that. It was the amount of people on the sidewalks just around the area was exciting to see, coming, drawn because of this place.
Yeah, I think it's been, it's such a cool addition to downtown. I think it's such a cool addition to that building, which has like really beautiful, but like wildly uninteresting commercial space for so long. I think this is like just such a neat and unique opportunity that we're really lucky that those businesses were able to hold on in the interim and like temporarily relocate. And I think it was just like a real testament to like the business community in the city that they really like worked so hard and worked together very collaboratively to like make the space work. But while we're talking about it, I do think it's important to mention that the black asphalt sidewalk is a temporary finish. We've gotten calls about that. But they needed to sort of level it out to put the scaffolding that they're putting on, and they are driving really big machinery on the sidewalks right now to get those windows installed. So I think it's probably worth saying that those black asphalt sidewalks are in fact a temp condition.
Well, I mean, we had a preliminary meeting prior to that happening, and it was people from DPW, Ally Carter from Economic Development. I was there, and David Lieb, but this is before the shutdown, but David Lieb and I had talked about this. And there's always a preference. You want to keep the original materials where you can. But many of you may know that David's an accessibility expert, and he knew that that was just so out of whack over there. We were like, listen, do whatever we have to do temporarily to get them open and then deal with the finished stuff later on. So it's worked out well for them. And yeah, I've heard it too, but at least it's temporary.
I appreciate that comment because I was driving down Merrimack Street the other morning and I'm like, oh boy. Well, yes. The entrance to Hive Market, is that from Page Street? Will they have an entrance eventually on Merrimack Street?
So this weekend, actually, they did have one of that. They had both entrances open. So the way the space is set up, it essentially goes like through the depth of the building kind of. And so you can go in from Merrimack Street and go out on Page and end up on the Merrimack Street side. So it will be fully accessible at some point. I think that the goal for the Hildreth building itself is that Page Street will act as like the residential kind of entry point of the building mostly. Of course, there will be access on Merrimack Street, but like the main sort of like lobby area, their
Sure. So the
mailboxes and that kind of stuff will be Page Street, and then the commercial spaces will be Merrimack Street.
Which is great. That makes sense. I mean, that makes sense because the parking lot is right behind, right? The John Street garage. And you want that Main Street exposure to Hive on Merrimack Street, right?
What's great about this is I've told this to people in the past, that when the Hildreth was first rehabbed in 1984 for renewed commercial and office space, they didn't address the two buildings to the rear. This time, when you approved it, both sides of the building are getting addressed. So it's going to really engage and liven up Page Street, I think, a lot more. There's one thing I want to note. Does the chairman have any announcements he wants to make?
What, the cat ate the wedding veil?
No, not the cat ate the wedding veil. What's the wedding and what happened last week?
Oh, goodness. So and we'll move to board member items, I guess. Move it to
Yes.
item D, right? So I became a grandfather last week. Which is 6 weeks ahead of schedule. That's my youngest daughter. And my oldest daughter is to be married this Sunday. And in the meantime, the cat ate the wedding veil. So it's been a very hectic week at the Valeris household. The cat's lucky to be alive.
To put you on the spot, but I thought it would be nice for everyone to hear.
It's all good stuff. It's all good stuff. Thank you. Yes. No, but getting back to the Hive, I'm real excited to check out that space. When I was a little kid, my dentist used to be in the Hildreth building up above. And so my reward was to go down to the counter in Woolworths and have a little snack afterwards. And so
The luncheonette.
there was a luncheonette in Woolworths, and there was one next door in Kresge's, which was an offshoot of Kmart. And they were both fun stores to kind of walk through and get a snack at. So it's nice to see that these spaces are
What I'm going to hope we can do is get a sneak peek of the upstairs, because I've been through some of the units up there. It's absolutely unbelievable what the views up and down Merrimack Street. It's going to be a really nice place for people to live in too.
Yeah, in the woodwork, I think, and the detailing in those spaces is spectacular.
They've retained a lot of that, the fireplaces, everything.
Yeah. Okay. Any other board member items and inquiries?
Yes, I do have one. I'm wondering, what are the ramifications for the board and the city of Lowell regarding the Smith Baker being one of the top 10 endangered buildings in Massachusetts?
It's only it's many statewide nonprofits do these endangered lists, and it's a way to generate awareness, advocacy, and so forth. There's no obligation on the part of the board, no obligation on the part of the city. It's one of 9 other properties around the state that were designated, and I actually worked there in 1994 for about 8 months, and I was in charge of the statewide endangered list, give or take. And that's when we got the mill smokestacks in Lowell listed back then as being endangered back then. But since that time, with a few exceptions, they're doing well. But there's nothing great that puts the city or the board under any obligation or pressure.
Just to follow up, so are there any other buildings in the past in Lowell that have been on this top 10 endangered, or is this the first time?
This is the second time,
The second, with
Yeah.
the smokestacks?
yeah.
Okay.
This is from what I'm aware of, yeah. And long ago, I was on the committee to help select these as well, another year. When you get community members nominate, committee reviews it, and then they name it. So, and it was news to me when I saw that pop up on my news feed that these were on and it was in. So obviously the Smith Baker folks, put a nomination in.
Yeah,
Okay.
very good. Okay. Last call for any board member inquiries. We've had a very lengthy meeting tonight, so
What time do you?
motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Is there a second?
I will second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.